Bond. James Bond.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
My name is Bond.
Who are you?
Bond. James Bond.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
Bond. James Bond.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
No more foreplay.
Blow up 007.
Hello and welcome to GeekCast Radio. In this episode, we're talking about Bond, James Bond. I am one of your hosts, Steve, Jim, and Mike, and joining me is Revolt Dan. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I am pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Yes, and this month in November, Dan and I are going to take a very, very long, arduous journey. November through December, we are going to be reviewing 18 of the 23 Bond films over on Movie Week in Review. But before we get to that, we're going to be talking about James Bond in general. In a few moments, we'll each get to how we knew the character, knew the movies, the books, the games, the music. Adele, oh God, give me a break. All that good stuff. So before we get started, I'm going to give a brief synopsis of who James Bond is. James Bond, codenamed 007, is a fictional character created in 1953 by writer Ian Fleming, who featured him in 12 novels and 2 short story collections. There have been 6 other authors who wrote authorized Bond novels or novelizations after Fleming's death in 1964. The fictional British Secret Service agent has also been adapted for television, radio, comic strip, and video game formats, as well as being used in the longest continually running and the second highest grossing film franchise to date, which started in 1962 with Dr. No, starring Sean Connery as Bond. As of 2012, there have been 22 films in the Eon production series, with the 23rd, Skyfall, due for release on November 9th, 2012. The films are renowned for a number of features, including the musical accompaniment, with theme songs to the films having picked up Academy Award nominations on several occasions. Other important elements which run through most of the films include Bond's cars, his guns, his gadgets. He is supplied with by Q Branch. So, yeah. Where did you first... Okay, what was your first exposure to the character in the franchise?
I think my first real exposure came actually not in film form or in book form, but in video game form. I think when I first really got into James Bond, it was because of GoldenEye on Nintendo 64. Before that, yeah, I knew who James Bond was. You couldn't not know who he was. He was so iconic, but I really didn't have that much interest into the character. But when GoldenEye came out, it kind of blew my mind because there's all these different characters, and I had no idea who they were. But I had a good friend who was a huge James Bond fan, and he kind of, guided me into that world and let me know who Jaws was and who Nick Nack was, and like all these different, characters. And being like a fan of superheroes at the time, it was like I saw a lot of parallels between James Bond and superheroes, and he kind of is one of the a first superhero movie in a way, just how out there and some of the different concepts are. But yeah, my first experience was definitely GoldenEye. Not the most, probably, for a lot of people our age, I think that kind of revolutionized the Bond character because he was kind of gone for such a long time. And then that movie came out, that game came out, both were huge hits. So I think that was my real first experience with the character.
Yeah. For me, I've said, for those of you who are longtime listeners of GeekCast Radio or of any of the other GCRN podcasts, I've often said about stuff that, as a kid, my mom would let me watch anything, pretty much. And I vaguely remember 90 or 91, 10 or 11 years old, I remember seeing License to Kill.
Oh, wow.
On VHS. Yeah, I remember seeing License to Kill. I remember seeing Man with the Golden Gun briefly. I remember seeing not License. I just mentioned that. Live and Let Die and A View to a Kill. I remember seeing the stuff as a kid. I don't remember every little aspect of it, but yeah, you're right. 1995 was huge. It was everywhere. I may need to refresh my memory and look this up, but I believe, there's a bit of trivia here, Brosnan wasn't... GoldenEye wasn't his first rodeo. He was originally supposed to take The Living Daylights and License to Kill.
Yeah, that's correct. He was actually...
But
Sorry.
He couldn't because of, I believe his wife passed away and he had a previous commitment to Remington Steele, the television show.
Yeah, what happened basically was... actually, he was cast as Bond. They announced that he was going to be in the next Bond movie. And what happened, Remington Steele was canceled. It was done with. But him becoming Bond kind of renewed interest in that show, and it became even more popular, so they renewed it for more episodes, and he was still tied to it. So by doing that, he couldn't do that film. He was removed, and he was stuck with Remington Steele, which was canceled only a few episodes later. And then Timothy Dalton kind of took his place. And anything about Timothy Dalton, he was originally he was thought of to be cast to take the place of Sean Connery when he left after He Only Lived Twice, but he turned it down because he thought he was too young. So it's been kind of a mismatch of all these different actors that have had the part and didn't take it, but Pierce Brosnan was originally he could have been in a lot more Bond films than he was, but because of Remington Steele, kind of stole that from him.
Yeah, but 1995 it was an epic year because, as I said, for me it was one of those things where I remember everyone knows the James Bond theme song. If you don't know the James Bond theme song, you're either too young or you've been living under a friggin' rock. As soon as I heard that theme song and as soon as I saw him in the bullet eye thing, the classic, walk into shot and then shoot the screen, James Bond scene, I was like, yes. And the only thing I had seen him in previous, as a kid, I had probably seen maybe one or two episodes of Remington Steele, but I didn't really know what it was. But the only other thing I had seen Brosnan in to that point was Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing. I'm like, the guy from Mrs. Doubtfire, James Bond? I'm like, oh, wow. But yeah. And
so that's how I get into it. Really, really, really get into it. I don't care what anybody says about, sure, we can pick movies apart all we want. I don't care what anybody says about Die Another Day. I still enjoy that film because it is Brosnan. I don't care what anybody says about any of the Brosnan films. I love all of them. Just because Brosnan for me was the one Bond that got me back into the franchise.
Yeah.
He was, at the time it was, the time was right. I was like, 15 when he started in 95. So it's like, the time was just right for my young mind to be molded by that version of James Bond. It was just amazing.
Yeah, GoldenEye did a lot of great things with kind of melding what the 90s with the James Bond character, because I know a lot of people were scared that, the Cold War is over. I mean, is he done? Can he survive past the Cold War? And they kind of proved that he could. Did you see GoldenEye in theaters, or did you just catch it on?
Oh yes, many times.
Oh.
That entire year, from the time it released to the time it hit media, I saw GoldenEye. I think throughout 95, throughout its run in the theaters, I saw it maybe 10 times. I loved it.
Wow.
I loved it. Just absolutely loved that movie. My other exposures to it outside of the older films, again, was, just like you, what was video games. I loved Nightfire. PC game, I believe. The N64 GoldenEye, the GoldenEye game for N64 might be, one of the best first-person shooters ever, but I hate the N64 controller. So I didn't fare too well at GoldenEye.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, ever since Brosnan, it's just been... I love this character. I love his version of the character. And going back and watching some of the other films, I do enjoy them. Going forward,
Yeah.
Daniel Craig is not my Wookiee bitch now. I don't know. My heart just kind of sank after Die Another Day when it was like, oh, we're going to take Bond in a new direction. We're going to show you him before he got his 00 status. And I'm like, how the hell are you going to do that now?
I think they kind of, in a lot of ways, I think they felt they took that character in its current kind of incarnation as far as they could. And I think Die Another Day, gave a lot of people a sour taste in their mouth. I know you're a big fan of it, but I know there's a good amount of people who weren't. I don't think it was that great at the box office, so they kind of and it's a common theme for Bond. I mean, usually they do that all the time. I mean, they did the same thing. They didn't technically reboot the franchise with The Living Daylights, but it's definitely a different take compared to like Roger Moore. They've kind of molded Bond to fit whatever's kind of popular at the time. And actually, though GoldenEye was my first experience with Bond, I really didn't get into the movies until the Craig version. Not that I just, for whatever reason, I just never could get all that invested in the Brosnan films. Not that I actually just...
You're dead to me.
Not that I dislike them, because I love GoldenEye. I think it's one of the best Bond films ever. And I actually even like going back and rewatching them. I'm like, wow, Tomorrow Never Dies I thought was really good too.
Yeah.
But personally, I think what really got me back in was the Craig series. But I guess we'll get into that more when we go over the movies individually. But
yeah,
that's kind of got me back into the franchise was when when Casino Royale came out.
There was just an epic feel from 95 to 02. Every year a Bond film was announced or released or there was a trailer for. Again, I'm not looking at the information. I'm going to have to look this up. But I believe from 95 to 02, every Brosnan film was released in November. Sometime in November. Maybe early December. I doubt it. But I think most of the time Bond is a November movie. And it was like, from 95 with GoldenEye to 97 with Tomorrow Never Dies is like every 2 years you got, well, in the case of from The World's Not Enough to Die Another Day, it was 3 years. But from 95 to 99, every 2 years you got a new Brosnan Bond film. And you got, for me, it was just so exciting. It was just so awesome. It was just amazing. Just amazing. As far as some of his character traits, he is a member of the Secret Intelligence Service, aka MI6. Bond was given the codename 007 and held the rank of Royal Naval Reserve Commander. Strangely enough, Ian Fleming's named the character after an American ornithologist, a branch of zoology that studies birds, who wrote the definite field guide, Birds of the West Indies. Fleming was aware of the guide because he was an avid bird watcher himself. Ian Fleming has explained why he chose the name James Bond for the character. He stated, in quote, "When I wrote the first one in 1953, I wanted Bond to be an extremely dull, uninteresting man to whom things happened. I wanted him to be a blunt instrument. When I was casting around for the name for my protagonist, I thought, by God, James Bond is the dullest name I have ever heard." Ian Fleming, The New Yorker, April 21st, 1962. The funny thing is when License came out in '89, my best friend as a kid was Jonathan Bond, so that was the other reason why we liked License to Kill. And plus, I don't think you have it in this part of the information, but there's also, sadly, there was a James Bond Jr. animated series. Ugh.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a book series to go along with that.
But I do find it interesting that Fleming picked the character name because he thought it was boring, which I never would have guessed because his name is so iconic. I mean, the term Bond, James Bond, has become, everyone knows what that is, and you think when you're creating a character that like, oh, I want to get a name that really, catches your ear and really kind of gives you everything you need to know about the character, and he picked it because it was bland and boring, which is funny because it kind of shows you that a name can mean what a name is meaningless, and the way you kind of approach the character makes that name have meaning. So I found that really interesting that that's what he wanted the character initially to be, and how much it kind of has changed over time.
Yeah. I can kind of see it, though, because if you look at... I can kind of see the blandness and why he thought it was dull, though, because if you look at the beginning of Tomorrow Never Dies, Brosnan puts on this strange accent, and he pretends to be a banker from Zurich or whatever it is, and, you as the audience don't assume, even though we know, we don't assume that is a secret agent, because the villain probably doesn't assume it until they find out, because Carver's man Gupta goes and does some digging. But it's like, even though we as the audience know that is Bond, the characters or the people that he's interacting with in the film, they don't know that.
Yeah, it could just be John Smith at that point.
Yeah, and again, I think it's not only because it's, even though Fleming thought it was a dull name, it's really common, really. I mean, it's like, it's one of those names that people will easily forget and also easily remember, because once you hear one of his enemies call him Commander Bond, you never forget that.
Yeah.
Other part of the character, the inspiration of the character was a mashup of individuals Fleming came across during World War II. One in particular was his brother Peter, who was involved in behind-the-lines operations in Greece. That's interesting. And of course, most authors and writers and creators of any kind of content, they're going to base a character of their creation on, someone they know. So that's pretty interesting that Peter Fleming is the real James Bond.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that that's something he would throw around parties and bars all the time. It's like, that James Bond, that's really me. But
yeah.
So.
Though the character was inspired by other individuals, much of Bond's tastes were Fleming's own, including his love of golf and gambling and taste for scrambled eggs, and both used the same toiletries. The look of Bond was meant to be a mashup of American singer Hoagy Carmichael and himself. It was literally stated in a few of the novels that Bond looks like Hoagy Carmichael.
The person that all Hoagy Carmichael, the person that all girls swoon over. I guess.
Yeah. Now I know people are going to be screaming at their iPods at me, but I have never read the books. The books were before my time.
I honestly have not either. I've always wanted to, but I always find it difficult to read a book that I read the movie or I watched the movie of. But I've wanted to before this, but just didn't have the time. But I've also not read the Fleming novels. I've read a lot about them. I've kind of got an understanding of what they're about and their tone, but personally, I've not really sat down to read the novels. It's probably something definitely should do, and hopefully I can get done someday.
Yeah. One of these days, we'll get around to it. As said before, Fleming came up with the idea while surveying the Navy. He notably told a friend that his is going to write the spy story to end all spy stories. He began writing the first novel, Casino Royale, in 1952 at his GoldenEye estate in Jamaica. Haha, funny. The first novel was published in 1953, largely due to the recommendation of his older brother, who was an established travel writer. 12 novels and 2 short story collections were published. The last 2 books, The Man with the Golden Gun, 1965, and Octopussy, and The Living Daylights, 1966, were published posthumously. I can't say this.
Posthumously. After he passed away.
He passed away, yeah. It seems like his authoring career, I mean, I know the guy passed away, but seems like his writing career wasn't very long.
No, it really. I mean, it in large part it went about 13 years, which I mean, and considering about you average about a novel a year, or novel short story a year, but yeah, it really wasn't that long. And considering like how short of time span and how quickly those movies have transitioned to popular films, it's kind of crazy. In a way, he didn't. I don't think he saw how much Bond exploded until after his death. I think Bond, obviously Doctor No already came out, but I think the Bond became even larger after he passed away. Unfortunately, I don't think he really got to see it at his highest levels. But.
Yeah, I don't think he passed away in '64, didn't he?
Yeah, Doctor No was already released, but
I think they were still working on Goldfinger. Goldfinger came out in '64, but I think they were, by the time he passed away, at the time of his death, it was probably in post-production.
Yeah, and that was a movie that put Bond, I think, at a completely different level. I mean, From Russia with Love and Doctor No were definitely popular and big hits, but GoldenEye was like a movie to Goldfinger. Jeez, Goldfinger was a movie to end all movies. It's it's still kind of looked at as the gold standard for the franchise, and I don't think he really got to see the huge success it became. But I think he in his shorter career he did accomplish a lot.
Oh. No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. As far as the post-Fleming stuff, after Fleming's death, a continuation novel called Colonel's Son was written by Kingsley Amis as Robert Markham and published in 1968. Amis had already written a literary study of Fleming's Bond novels in his 1965 work, The James Bond Dossier. Although novelizations of two of the Eon Productions Bond films appeared in print, James Bond, The Spy Who Loved Me, and James Bond, Moonraker, both written by screenwriter Christopher Wood, the series of novels did not continue until the 1980s.
Yeah, I mean, basically, after he died, as you would expect, it was so popular that it wasn't going to stop. So, multiple authors have kind of continued the series and put their own spin on it for the most part. And I think most recently they've kind of updated the character to be more post 9/11, to fit in this current world. But yeah, there's a lot of the novels that came out after Fleming that have actually kind of made it into films as well. But yeah, it's one of those characters I think that'll probably continue and always be there because of how popular it is.
Yeah, just as just kind of a cliff note here, kind of ending the book stuff, because we don't know, neither one of us have read the original Flemings or the post-Fleming original old books. There are some other ones that we'll talk about here in a second, but I know this is very, very sad, I mentioned earlier that James Bond Jr. Animated series, there were books for that. I remember having those as a kid.
Yeah, the Young Bond novels, which is...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember having that stuff, and it would kind of make sense that after Fleming's death, that it kind of would dissipate away until the 80s, because if you think about it, every film, or I think every film, you can correct me if I'm wrong, every film would always end with James Bond will return in
mostly
whatever.
Yeah, mostly all of them. I think there was a few that didn't because there were different legal issues that. But a lot of them did say returning in. I don't know I think the one that pops in my head that didn't was probably On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I think that one didn't because I think they weren't sure where they were going to go with the character. But for the most part, yeah, they would name it. And sometimes they got the name wrong because after The Man with the Golden Gun, I think they said, coming next for Your Eyes Only. And the next movie was actually Moonraker. I think I might have the timing different, but they kind of threw Moonraker in there to kind of compete with like the Star Wars and trying to hit that when it was hot. So, but yeah, they usually would announce what's coming next, or at least indicate that he's returning. And you kind of see kind of a continuation of that with the Avengers now, because after all the Avengers movies, you always see like, oh, Thor will return in the Avengers, or I think that's something they borrowed definitely from the Bond franchise.
Yeah. As far as other books, I was huge, as from the time I was probably 10 to 17, whenever a film came out, if I really, really liked it, I also knew that there was novelizations based on it. You know, it's just like today where they have, you know, prequel comics and this, that, and everything else. Same thing. Back in the 90s, the novelization to accompany a film, just like a soundtrack or whatever else, was huge. And I remember having the GoldenEye novelization, and oh man, it was so cool to read it before seeing the film. And back then, I didn't remember anything between the time I read the book to the time I saw the movie. I was still fresh going into the film after reading the book, and I haven't read that book in years. So the other ones kind of close out the book section here. There were 2 other Bond novel series, Young Bond and The Moneypenny Diaries. Young Bond series of novels and short stories were written by Charlie Higginson from 2005 to 2009. The first Young Bond novel, Silverfin, was also adapted into a graphic novel. The Moneypenny Diaries were a trilogy of novels chronicling the life of Miss Moneypenny, M's personal secretary. The novels were written by Kate Westbrook. Now, the Young Bond series and what I'm talking about, James Bond Jr., 2 totally different things. Young Bond is not James Bond Jr. James Bond Jr. was something so totally different. I remember the only reason why I remember James Bond Jr. books is because my mom used to get them for me through the school scholastic book fair thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was 2 totally different things. We are going to talk about some TV now. Again, this is before both of our times, but in 1954, Ian Fleming was paid $1,000, $8,654 in 2012 standards, to adapt the novel Casino Royale into a 1-hour television adventure as part of the Climax series. It aired in October 1954 and starred Barry Nelson as James Jimmy Bond. The novel was adapted for American audiences as Bond was made into an American agent working for Combined Intelligence.
Yeah, and that actually is really hard to get hold of. I've actually tried to locate it to watch it, but it's very rare. I mean, it's back then a lot of TV wasn't saved to begin with. But it's definitely difficult to find. I mean, it's out there in certain locations, but it is funny how they had to change everything to fit American audiences. What's not there, they also made Felix Unger into a British agent, who's usually a CIA agent. So of course they have to make him American, and changing his name from James to Jimmy, which I think, I mean, it's such Jimmy, you think of the 1950s. It's just one of those names that kind of, I don't know. It's something you don't see nowadays where someone like a kind of character is going to be called Jimmy. Usually it's kind of more kiddish in a way.
Yeah, there is no kryptonite for Mr. Olsen. We have some radio stuff as well. In 1956, the novel Moonraker was adapted into a radio broadcast on South African radio. You Only Live Twice was adapted into a 90-minute radio play for BBC Radio in 1990, and in 2008, a Dr. No 2008 was adapted for radio as well. 2010 Goldfinger was adapted, and in 2012, From Russia with Love was adapted. I never knew there were radio stuff for Bond.
No, I didn't either. I don't think they really made their way over to the U.S. all that much. I think they were broadcast on BBC, but I never would have thought, if you told me that there are radio spots or radio adaptations for Bond, that they would happen recently. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. I actually would like to definitely check those out one day, but I don't even know if they're available.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not too up on these. I'm not sure, and it's not that we're not doing our research here. It's just that we've never been exposed to this stuff. But like you would think, like in 1956, anywhere from the 50s all the way up to the 80s, there were radio plays of stuff. I mean, there's radio plays of Superman stuff. There's radio plays of anything you can think of. So I can see that, and I can see it working, but as far as stuff for today's market, I don't know about that.
Yeah. Speaking of the radio plays, I actually, long story short, there's this thing I go to that's called World War II Weekend, and they kind of do a lot of things that happened during that time, and one thing they do are radio plays. You actually see them kind of acting out what it would be like at that time, and they did a James Bond radio play, and it was pretty cool just to see how that whole thing would go down, and how, and how much it was kind of like, it was an experience, definitely, because seeing how much goes into a radio play, how you have the sound people on the one side and how everything has to be so in sync to make it work. Obviously, in today's standards, it's so much easier, but during that time, I mean, you had everything was happening as it happened, sound.
Yeah.
Sound.
Yeah, it was almost like a live broadcast. It was, you had people running around like chickens with their heads cut off.
Exactly. I mean, it was perfectly timed. It's like you can tell, how disciplined they had to be. But it's kind of cool that they're coming back with it. So,
And the last section we're going to talk about before we take a break is comics. Fleming was first apprehensive to have his books adapted into strips as he felt they lacked the quality of his writing, but he eventually agreed. The first strip, Casino Royale, was published from 7 July 1958 to 13 December 1958 and was written by Anthony Hearn and illustrated by John McCluskey. Most of the Bond novels and short stories have since been adapted for illustration. Marvel Comics published 2-issue adaptation of For Your Eyes Only in 1981, and Marvel also published accompanying comic books to Octopussy in 1983. Again, something that I just would never know.
Yeah, I've seen copies of those. I've never read them per se. I mean, when I first started, it wasn't in comic book form. Obviously, it was in the classic strips, like
newspaper strip, yeah,
like Dick Tracy, and things like that. And obviously, you can't see, but if you look at the way that Bond was kind of depicted in those, he kind of looked like a cross between like Clint Eastwood and John Wayne. Just the way they made him look, definitely a lot different than Sean Connery. It was kind of an interesting take on him before the films came out. But yeah, I mean, I'm surprised they haven't kind of tried to go back and do more comic books with the Bond character, but it hasn't.
Comic books or comic strips. I mean, can you imagine opening a Sunday paper? Here's your Garfield. Here's your what's that stupid bitch's name? Is it Kathy? I forget. There's Garfield. Here's Peanuts. Here's Family Circus. Here's James Bond strip. James Bond strip. What the hell?
Yeah.
I mean, that would have just been simply amazing. So we're going to take a quick break. You are going to hear some film trailers, a couple of film trailers, and we'll come back to talk about the movies of James Bond.
This man has a secret ambition.
I propose to end the domination of Silicon Valley. Project Main Strike.
A secret plan.
For which each of you will pay me $100 million.
And a secret weapon.
We're not sure about her. Name's Mayday.
Someone will take care of you.
Oh, you'll see to that personally, will you?
There's only one man who can stop them.
Hold that parachute! Is it English, sir?
The name is Bond. James Bond.
And I'm Dick Tracy, and you're still under arrest.
In the world of high adventure, the highest number is still 007. 007 with Tanya Roberts, Grace Jones, and Christopher Walken. Has James Bond finally met his match? Find out this summer in A View to a Kill. Title song performed by Duran Duran.
Stop. Look. He's gunning for trouble. 007. It spells Bond.
Shocking.
He's the idol of every woman.
Who are you?
Bond. James Bond.
The envy of every man. The nemesis of the treacherous Mr. Goldfinger. Goldfinger, a triumph in thrill-making cinema entertainment.
The man with the mind.
A three-time winner for Fleming's Secret Agent 007.
Who are you?
My name is Pussy Galore.
Isn't it customary to grant the condemned man his last request?
You've asked for this.
Come and purr over Honor Blackman as Pussy Galore. The female who is all feline. Also starring Gert Frober as Goldfinger. International cheat. International menace.
Gentlemen! Goldfinger, why weren't we told that New York and the West Coast were in on this?
Goldfinger, I made a delivery. Where is my money?
And you owe me $1 million.
Goldfinger, the man with a finger in every pie. His goal, Fort Knox, the world's biggest bank. His enemy, 007, the world's wiliest, toughest gentleman agent with a license to kill. 007, it spells Bond. James Bond, mixing business with girls and thrills. Girls and fun. Girls and danger. The hotter the danger, the cooler he takes it.
I think you've made your point, Goldfinger. Thank you for the demonstration.
Choose your next witticism carefully, Mr. Bond. It may be your last.
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Is the target.
72 hours ago, a secret weapon system was detonated over Severnaya.
And the threat is real.
GoldenEye exists. A radiation surge that destroys everything with an electronic circuit.
You can still depend on one man.
I want you to find GoldenEye.
3.
Find who took it.
2.
And stop it.
1.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
The world's most famous secret agent is back.
We aim to please.
And this time, 007 is facing the ultimate enemy. The man who knows him best.
Hello, James. What an unpleasant surprise.
006.
What's the matter? No pithy comeback?
He was your friend, and now he's your enemy, and you will kill him.
Is the satellite in range? Target is London.
Now, the entire world is about to be caught in the crossfire.
See you in hell, James. You first. Kill him.
The pleasure will be all mine.
Did you check her out? Head to toe.
3 clicks, arms the fuse. Don't say it.
The writing's on the wall?
Grow up, 007.
I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, a relic of the Cold War.
You know, James, I was always better.
Both of you, stop it! You like boys with toys.
Trick is to quit while you're still a kid.
I wouldn't think of it.
Charming, sophisticated secret agent. Shaken but not disturbed.
Get us out of here!
Bond, only Bond. Man just won't take a hint.
You don't need the gun.
That depends on your definition of safe sex.
On November 17th, United Artists brings you,
Trust me,
James Bond.
Why can't you just be a good boy and die? That's one trick I've never learned.
What do you know about a man called Scaramanga?
The man with the golden gun. He always uses a golden bullet.
This trinket was sent with a note requesting special delivery to you.
I've never seen Mr. Scaramanga. Mr. Bond, this is impossible. I cannot.
I can't tell you. You'll kill me.
Who?
Scaramanga.
Roger Moore, back in action in the exotic East as James Bond, 007, on a collision course with the most dangerous man alive. The man with the golden gun.
Hold on, sir.
James Bond, on the job. The girls are willing.
Dreamed about you setting me free.
The pace is killing.
Stay in there, good night. We've got you spotted. How about a demonstration, boy? Certainly, sir.
You'll meet old friends and new enemies. It's non-stop Bond. The action is spectacular.
You're not. I sure am, boy.
Reaching a new high for 007.
Bonjour, Monsieur Bond. I am Nicknut. Monsieur Scaramanga will welcome you personally.
The target is the highest-priced killer in the world. He plays a deadly game, and the stakes are sky high.
Stations. Aye, aye, sir. Sound the general alarm.
The Chinese pilot insists we're inside their territorial waters and he will fire.
An act of violence.
Torpedo, torpedo, torpedo.
It was an unprovoked attack on a ship in international waters.
The promise of war.
And instead of decisive action, all you want to do is
My
investigate.
goal is to prevent World War III, Admiral.
Now, the world has only one chance for peace.
When will our ships be in position?
48 hours.
And just one man for the job.
Bond. James Bond.
How much do you know about Elliot Carver, 007?
Worldwide media ban. Those newspapers, radio, satellite TV.
There's no news like bad news.
I understand you once had a relationship with Carver's wife.
Was it something I said?
How about the words, I'll be right back? I'm from the New China News Agency.
Looking for a news story?
Could have taken care of him.
Let the mayhem begin. Your new BMW.
Will you need collision coverage?
Yes.
Property destruction?
Definitely.
Personal injury?
Accidents do happen.
Grow up, 007.
You seem to have developed a certain attachment.
I get to work with a decadent agent of a corrupt Western power.
I think you found the right decadent, corrupt Western agent as a partner.
Phase 2 is underway.
This holiday season,
The hell is he doing?
his job, the world belongs to Bond.
When you remove Mr. Bond's heart, there should just be enough time for him to watch it stop beating.
I would have thought watching your TV shows was torture enough.
We are back, and we hope you enjoyed that trailer-filled Bond goodness there. The films, oh boy, the films. In 1962, Eon Productions, the company of Canadian Harry Saltzman and American Albert R. Cubby Broccoli, released the first cinema adaptation of Ian Fleming's novel Dr. No, featuring Sean Connery as 007. Connery starred in the further 4 films before leaving the role after You Only Live Twice, which was taken up by George Lazenby for On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Lazenby left the role after just 1 appearance, and Connery was tempted back for his last Eon-produced film, Diamonds Are Forever. In 1973, Roger Moore was appointed to the role of 007 for Live and Let Die and played Bond a further 6 times over 12 years before being replaced by Timothy Dalton for 2 films. After a 6-year hiatus during which legal wrangle threatened Eon's productions of the Bond films, Irish actor Pierce Brosnan was cast as Bond in GoldenEye, released in 1995. He remained in the role for the total of 4 films before leaving in 2002. And of course, in 2006, Daniel Craig was given the role of Bond for Casino Royale, which rebooted the franchise. Eon Productions series has grossed, is that $4,910,000,000?
That's correct.
Oh my god. Let me repeat that to you listeners. The Eon Productions films have over time grossed $4,910,000,000.
It says over 12 trillion with inflation. I don't know how accurate that is. I mean, and when we get to inflation, that gets kind of messy. But yeah. Officially, it's about 4,910,000,000. Considering, it's been 50 years, all the different movies, all the re-releases and things like that. But yeah, it's currently the...
Yeah, it's only, it's the second highest grossing film series behind Harry Plopper.
Yeah, and I'm certain it will retake its top spot eventually, either with Skyfall or, eventually, because it's Bond's going to continue, and obviously Harry Potter is over with, so it'll eventually reclaim that top spot.
Yeah. As we said at the beginning of the podcast, our first introduction pretty much was GoldenEye. I mean, yes, I do remember seeing License as a kid, but I remember seeing some of the other ones. But these films are just amazing. I'm surprised. Now, at one point earlier this year or the end of 2011, I had joined Netflix at one point. I forget how long I've been on there. I think I've been on there like a year and a half, 2 years. I joined Netflix, and at one point, I think a good majority of all 22 were on Netflix, and now there's only like 7 that are now available for streaming on Netflix.
Yeah, it was weird. For a short time, it was like only a short window that they had almost all the films streaming, and then none of them were streaming for the longest time. Yep. And then a few weeks ago, a few were streaming, like a couple Roger Moore, and kind of a couple random ones. So it's all the weird licensing stuff when it comes to streaming. But hopefully, maybe they'll all be eventually streaming. But as of right now, there's only a few that are.
Yeah, there's only a few on Netflix. As far as iTunes goes, oh my God, I could not believe this. A couple weeks ago, or about a month ago, before we recorded this here in November, I saw, when you open the iTunes store and they'll have the main page thing and they'll have a little scroller showing you what the top thing is. I saw a thing that said 007. I'm like, what? I clicked on it. At the time, the first time I clicked on it, it was only a handful of the films. I went back and looked at it again. All 22 are in iTunes to buy for HD or SD.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just simply amazing.
Yeah, and they recently came out with 50th anniversary pack that has the huge Blu-ray collection, has all the films on Blu-ray that I think came out in September, and and I think that is probably why they're now available again on iTunes.
Yeah. But these movies, oh my God. And I know that, Dan and I are going to be reviewing 18 of the 23 films. Now, people will be saying, why aren't you doing them all? Well, time constraints, number one, and number two, that's a lot of movies to watch within a month and a half, 2 months' time, because we're going to be doing our Bond Spotlight from November 7th to, I believe, December 15th. I don't remember when the last Saturday is before Christmas. Let me look that up really quick. December 15th is the final Saturday before the Christmas jump starts happening in. So we're going to try to fit 18 of the 23 films in. The only films we decided that we would not cover is because there's way too much more here. We are not covering Thunderball. We are not covering Diamonds Are Forever. We are not covering Moonraker. We are not covering For Your Eyes Only. And we are not covering Octopussy. Now, I know a lot of Bond fans might say, oh my God, why aren't you covering Octopussy? It's got the best Bond title ever, etc., etc., etc. But we had to pick and choose. And, between my choices and Dan's choices, those other 18 are the ones that we came up with, and we are going to be reviewing them and releasing them on MWire in a series of films for MWire called Shaken Not Stirred. Yes, that's right. That's how we like our martinis, damn it. And we're going to do them in theatrical release date order. So you're going to get from Dr. No to Skyfall all the way through.
And though we don't have an episode of MR dedicated to every movie, we'll be touching on each film in some way or another, via different articles or something like that. But
right.
Yeah, but it's just like Mike said, we would love to do every film, but it's just based upon time, and there'll be plenty there for you to listen to. So
now, a lot of you listeners might be saying, why the hell are two Americans reviewing Bond films? Well, number one, they're not just British spy movies. They're also spy movies in general that are just simply, for the most part, simply awesome. I will send you all over to earth-2.net. Look up a podcast called For Your Ears Only. That is Ian Wilson and Adam Fisher. They reviewed, to date, up until Skyfall, they've reviewed all 22 films, and they will be reviewing Skyfall on For Your Ears Only. I'll put the link in the show notes and all that good stuff so you guys can check that out. I'll put the iTunes subscribe link in there. It's essentially two Brits reviewing Bond, and it's just simply an amazing podcast. Everyone who's a James Bond fan needs to listen to this podcast. It's just amazing. So the films. What else do we want to say about the films in general?
Well, I guess what we can also touch upon is all the different Bonds. I mean, do you? I mean, you talked about Pierce Brosnan is probably your favorite Bond. Would you say that's for certain?
As a personal favorite, yes, I will say that. I would say my top three are Pierce Brosnan, Sean Connery, and then Timothy Dalton. Roger Moore, he was Bond for way too damn long, and there are movies that you have to pick and choose. I love The Man with the Golden Gun, not because it's a Roger Moore Bond film, but just because it's an amazing spy movie. I watched it recently on Netflix just because, and I'm not trying to skip ahead in our coverage, but I was curious to remember that film again, and I think one of the reasons why I remembered it so fondly was because I did see it, whether it was rented through a video store as a kid or something. I did remember seeing it, but the whole time I was expecting, look, boss, the plane, because of Knick Knack, of who he is. But no, I watched The Man with the Golden Gun a couple weeks ago, and it really made me think of what a good, not necessarily just a spy movie, but what a good mystery movie, and what good mystery movies that there used to be. Because I hadn't seen that movie I hadn't seen that movie in probably 20 years. Even though I did have one of the other Bond sets, I still don't remember watching it when I had it. I had one of the older, I think it was 2008's 21 box set or whatever it was. I don't remember watching it back then when I had the DVDs, and watching it again, it was like, it kept me on the edge of my seat because I didn't know what the hell was going to happen.
Yeah.
It's a testament to old cinema.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, that film and a lot of Roger Moore films, his era was probably the most distinct compared to all the other Bonds in a way. Like, I think each one of his films was almost like a different type of film. Like, Live and Let Die was very almost like a blaxploitation film. Moonraker was a science fiction. Man with the Golden Gun was almost like a mystery, like you said, almost like a pseudo western too, with the dual aspect. But yeah, I think he in his career, he's probably had the most inconsistent career. I think he's had some really great Bond movies and some of the worst Bond movies. Personally for me, I think kind of like I mentioned, where I really got into the films was Daniel Craig and Casino Royale, and I liked his take. I felt like where they were going with it is what I really appreciated. You saw the influence of the Bourne franchise and how the more serious take of it. But going back and rewatching some of the older films, I mean, Connery obviously is great. I think he is always going to be the best Bond, just by anyone's comparison. I think everyone's always kind of trying to live up to what he did. But I think Timothy Dalton gets kind of a bad rap, and George Lazenby both kind of get a bad rap, because obviously Lazenby had one, Dalton had two, but I think they had more of a career, they could have had a better career if, Dalton I think deserved another movie, and Lazenby wasn't the greatest actor in the world. He was a model turned actor for that movie, but I think for what he did, I think he pulled it off for the most part. I mean, he was going after Connery. That's trying to replace Babe Ruth. No one wants that, and I think unfortunately he wasn't really up to the challenge at the time. But if he was given more time, I think he could have held his own.
Yeah, I would piggyback back off of that and say that from Connery to Lazenby is kind of like going from Peter Cullen to Neil Kaplan. Neil Kaplan was the voice actor that voiced Optimus Prime in Robots in Disguise, and he was trying to do a horrible Peter Cullen impression.
Yeah.
And that's not good at all. If I'm not going by personal, choice and ranking them as best overall, I would say Connery. I would say Brosnan, and then I would probably put Moore, and then Dalton, and then Lazenby would be last.
Yeah.
The thing about Dalton though is so funny with License to Kill. 2 years later, he would be a German Nazi in The Rocketeer.
Yeah, it's funny because I think each Bond had a different they did other things well. Roger Moore, I think, had a really good dry wit to him, and I think he could really sell the one-liners. But he couldn't do the action, especially near the end, because he was really getting up there in age. It was getting more and more evident that the person doing the action scene was not Roger Moore; it was a stunt double. But when Timothy Dalton came, he could really do the action. He kind of brought a physicality to it that wasn't there probably since Connery was there. and then kind of Pierce Brosnan, I felt, is kind of in between Roger Moore and Sean Connery, because he's humorous, he can sell the romance, but he has a lot of physicality as well. Like he can sell the action scenes. And Daniel Craig, I think if they're the one knock on him is he doesn't look like he's having fun in the role up to this point. I haven't seen Skyfall yet. Unfortunately, it's not out. But even with Quantum of Solace and Casino Royale, it's definitely more serious. Like, the romance isn't as realistic. But though I love his performance, it definitely doesn't feel like a Bond performance in a way compared to what's came before.
Well, and the thing is that, all right, we've had from, what is it, 62 to 80 now. 62 to 89 was essentially and again, Bond fans, don't send me hate mail here, but 1962 to 1989 was essentially the golden age of James Bond, where you had multiple actors playing the role. When Brosnan brought it back, he brought his swagger to it, his attitude, just all these little nuances to Bond. And 95 to 02 is the silver age of Bond. And from 2006 to now is the new age of Bond, where they've gone back and they've said, hey, we're rebooting the franchise, which to me, it kind of makes sense. It does, because, every few years there would be a new Bond, or, and that's all well and good. Did I think after Die Another Day that Pierce Brosnan would go on to play 3 or 4 or 5 more movies? No. But, I mean, it's just like anything where, you see an announcement, and if you're not happy with it, you're not happy with it. And I was like, Daniel Craig, who the fuck is this guy? I was like, what the hell? Give me my Bond back, damn it. And it was one of those things where I get it now, to where it's okay. The Craig era is the new era. They're gonna go back. They're gonna rebuild his story in Casino Royale by putting him before he gets his 00 status, and not necessarily a young agent, but a green agent that's still learning and has like really, really raw methods. I think the Quantum of Boredom could have been a little bit better, though, because that was just nothing but a revenge film. I don't think I've ever seen a Bond movie where I'm like, why am I watching this?
Yeah.
Well, there are those few, like Moonraker, but like the problem with the Craig era for me is, from Casino Royale to Quantum of Solace, they tried to set it up as sequels instead of individual adventures. If you look at Brosnan, GoldenEye was its own adventure. Tomorrow Never Dies was its own adventure that kind of took place afterwards. As the Brosnan era had progressed, you saw him get older, and different things happened to him, and this, that, and the other thing, and everything else. With Craig, what they tried to do was, instead of doing single adventures that have some sort of overlying continuity in them somewhere, they tried to make a sequel in Quantum of Boredom. And I was like, no.
Yeah, I mean, they've attempted a little bit of that. I mean, like Diamond, I don't think they've had a direct sequel, really. I mean, Diamonds Are Forever has the opening sequence is directly related to On Her Majesty's Secret, or For Her Majesty's Secret Service. But I think with Quantum of Solace, I think the issue with that movie is clearly the script. And what happened was, a big part of that reason was the writer's strike. I think they kind of had to haphazardly put that all together, and I think they even admit that movie was not nearly as good as it could have been. And like you mentioned, it was kind of a mangled mess, and it was overly complicated, and it felt rushed the entire time. So I'm hoping.
And as I said, it's solely a revenge film, because he's trying to get vengeance for them killing his chick from Casino Royale.
Yeah, and I think. Revenge has never really played well with a lot of Bond fans, especially when you go back to License to Kill. A lot of people don't like that movie because of the revenge plot and how it kind of went away from what made Bond great. But yeah, hopefully with Skyfall they can kind of correct their mistakes, and we can see what Daniel see with a better director this time around. I think we're hopefully going to get a better film. So.
Is it Martin Campbell again?
No, it's Sam Mendes who directed.
Sam Mendes, okay. Wait, Martin Campbell did 2 of them. He did GoldenEye, and what was the other one?
He did GoldenEye, and he did Casino Royale.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, so far I'm loving the Skyfall trailers. I can't wait to go see it on the 9th of this month. It's one of those things where that teaser that they showed of the flashes and then the interrogation, and it's like, let's play a word game, blah 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 blah, and they do all these words, and then the guy says Skyfall, and Bond says done or completed or whatever it was. I can't remember off the top of my head what he said, but it was just like one of those things where it's pulling me in, like where Quantum of Solace was the first Bond film since I have been seeing them in theaters that I did not go see in the theater.
Yeah,
I did not want to see Quantum of Solace. Skyfall, I'm coming around to it. I'm still coming around to Daniel Craig. I'm not sure how far the producers and writers and directors and whoever else, the people that are in charge, are going to go forward with him as Bond. But if I can just erase the memory of Quantum and just stick with Casino Royale, I was pretty happy with Casino Royale, even though I'm still jaded about it not being Brosnan. Like I said, I think that this is the new age of Bond, and this is kind of rebooting the franchise to the point of, hey, let's tell his story from his origins of becoming an agent and stuff. So I do like that aspect of it. There are non-Eon films, surprisingly. I knew about these, but I don't think I've ever seen any of them. In 1967, Casino Royale was adapted into a parody Bond film starring David Niven and Sir James as Sir James Bond and Ursula Andress as Vesper Lind. David Niven had been Ian Fleming's preference for the part of James Bond.
Yeah,
the result.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I've watched Casino Royale, or the 1967 version. It's a movie you do not need to see. It's not very good. Of all the different James Bond parodies, it's probably one of the weaker ones. I mean, it's probably more star-studded. I mean, Woody Allen's even in it, but it was streaming on HBO Go, and I watched it, and I was like, this is no, it's not really worth it. It's one you can skip, and you're not missing anything.
Yeah. As far as Eon versus non-Eon, anything that's not in the official MGM, UA, Eon, whatever you want to call it, anything that's not in the official film franchise, I have not, nor will I ever see. The result of a court case in the High Court in London in 1963 allowed Kevin McClory to produce a remake of Thunderball titled Never Say Never Again. In 1983, the film starring Sean Connery as Bond was not part of the Eon series of Bond films. That's this is almost this whole Eon versus non-Eon canon thing is kind of like, are you union or non-union? It's like voice actors or SAG, or it's like, are you SAG or not? This is what it seems like, and I was like, why would Connery even do that? 97, Sony Corporation acquired all or some of the McClory's rights in an undisclosed deal, which were then subsequently acquired by MGM, whilst on 4 December 1997, MGM announced that the company had purchased the rights in Never Say Never Again from Schwartzman Company Tartaglia Film. Eon now currently, as of 2012, holds the full adaptation rights to all of the Fleming Bond novels. Now, this is interesting because they could do so much with it.
Yeah, I mean that court. I mean there's been legal battles with the Bond franchise forever. So hopefully, I mean that's a big reason. Part of the reasons why there's been delays. I mean, Skyfall has been kind of in development for a long time because of MGM went bankrupt and everything. But hopefully, with this all squared away, they can kind of look. Hopefully, it's smooth sailing from here on. And
yeah. And as I just said, for me personally, as far as Eon versus non-Eon, anything that's not official production, I don't care.
Yeah, and Never Say Never Again. Again, it actually came out the same year as, I believe, For Your Eyes Only. They both came out around the same time, and it's funny because that's crazy that there'd be 2 James Bond films at the same time. But yeah, I think Sean Connery at that time took the role back because his career was not in the greatest place during those years. It's funny that in 1983 he's doing James Bond, and then 1989 he's in The Last Crusade, and like how much he aged in that 6-year period. It's kind of crazy. I mean, he's been bald forever. He's been wearing a toupee, but I think he finally, once I think he played Bond for the last time, he finally kind of accepted his age, and I think it made it did dividends for his career.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean that's yeah. Now the music of Bond. Oh my God, the music. The music is just amazing. The James Bond theme was written by Monty Norman and was first orchestrated by the John Barry Orchestra for 1962's Dr. No. Bond film stapler theme songs heard during their title sequences sung by well-known popular singers. Several of the songs produced for the films have been nominated for Academy Awards for original song, including Paul McCartney's Live and Let Die, Carly Simon's Nobody Does It Better, and Sheena Easton's For Your Eyes Only. For the non-Eon produced Casino Royale, Burt Bacharach's score included The Lock of Love, which was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Song as well. Just like the overall main Bond theme, the actual songs that tell you about the films are key. They're so key.
Do you have a favorite Bond song?
Oh, man. I liked... only because I like the artist, Chris Cornell's song for Casino Royale, I think it is. I liked that, but again, going back to my Bond roots here, Tina Turner and GoldenEye, everybody loves that song.
Yeah.
Everybody should love that song. What, you don't like it?
No, I think it's good. I like.
Okay, I was gonna say I thought you meant like no, I don't like it.
No, I like that song. I think it's very it really played homage to kind of the classic Bond themes of past. But yeah, I do like that song.
I also like the man, and it's because I like the movie. But I haven't heard it in years, or I haven't seen it in years. But I like the Man with the Golden Gun song. I like that one as well. What about you? Did you have a favorite?
Probably my favorite's probably Live and Let Die. It's actually
Yeah.
I think when I heard I didn't realize it was a Bond song for
Yes.
a long time, but that's probably my favorite. I think it's also used really well in the movie. Nobody does it better. It's really well, and I also really like Goldfinger. So
The other one I really, really enjoyed, and it's simply because I'm an '80s kid, sadly, A View to a Kill, Duran Duran.
yeah, that's also a really good one. It's one of the probably the popular ones. It was a huge hit during its day.
Yeah. So we've got the music out of the way. The music is just simply amazing, and how they work in. And again, I found this more with Brosnan. I know I keep going back to that. I know people are probably screaming at their iPods, "Leave the Brosnan alone, you bastard!" But I noticed more things in those 4 films than any of the other ones that I've seen. Like, In the World Is Not Enough, when he steals the boat to go after the chick. He has to at one point dive, and it's the boat it can dive and whatever else. And you hear the Bond theme as he's doing as the boat's doing the dive. It cuts to the underwater scene, and you hear this little nuance as underwater, Pierce Brosnan as James Bond is adjusting his tie as like, this doesn't bother me at all. That's why I like Brosnan so much, is because of those little nuances, and the music fit that, because it was kind of like, ha ha. It was almost like a laugh in a musical note where it's like, ha ha ha. It was so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you're actually right. I mean, in the early Bond films, really up to The Living Daylights, the Bond theme was not used all that often. It was reserved for certain moments, but I think kind of the big influence that changed that was probably Indiana Jones, that used its theme anytime like Indiana Jones was doing Indiana Jones things. And I think they saw that, and then they kind of kept up with that, and they kind of used it more. And I like you, I appreciate it when it's used more and opportunity used in little pieces here and there. But yeah, I mean that that theme song to me never gets old. I mean, it's 50 years old, and it still holds up to this day. It can be used in a variety of different scenes, and really, hardcore action scenes or more, soft, dramatic moments. But yeah, it's a great theme song. Probably one of the best, if not the best theme songs.
Yeah. Bond has also been in video games since 1983. This is really interesting here, people. The first Bond video game developed and published by Parker Brothers, oh my god, was released for the Atari 2600 and Atari 5200 and the Atari 800 and the Commodore 64 and the ColecoVision. In 97, the first-person shooter video game GoldenEye 007 was developed by Rare for the Nintendo 64, based on the 1995 Pierce Brosnan film. The game received very positive reviews and won the BAFTA Interactive Entertainment Award for UK Developer of the Year in 1998, and sold over 8 million copies worldwide, grossing $250 million. Oh my god. $250 million in the 90s? Holy crap.
Yeah.
In 99, Electronic Arts acquired the license and released Tomorrow Never Dies on 16 December 99. On October 2000, they released The World Is Not Enough for the Nintendo 64, followed by 007 Racing for the PlayStation. In 2003, the company released Everything or Nothing, which is one game I always wanted to play, I never did. Includes the likenesses and voices of Pierce Brosnan, Willem Dafoe, Heidi Klum, Judi Dench, and John Cleese, amongst others. November 2005, Electronic Arts released video game adaptation of From Russia with Love, which involves Sean Connery's image and voiceover for Bond. Now that's interesting. That's interesting because, okay, when was his last film? Off top of I don't remember.
1983. Never Say Never Again was his last Bond film.
All right, 1983 to 2005. Obviously, the man's voice isn't going to degrade over time. I mean, Sean Connery has one of the most imitatable voice. Everyone has a Sean Connery impression, okay? But just think that, almost 3 decades later, he comes back and does the voiceover for a Bond video game. That's just amazing to me.
Yeah, and considering he's been retired for a long time, he has not been in movies. And they with that video game, they kind of combined, some of the footage or some of the dialogue from the original movie along with his new voiceover. And I think you could kind of tell when it was new and it was old because obviously he's older, so his voice is a little bit different. But yeah, it was pretty cool that he would still go back and kind of. He's not sick of being Bond. I think he still appreciates what that did for him.
And in 2006, Electronic Arts announced a game based on the then upcoming film Casino Royale. The game was canceled because it would not be ready by the film's release in November of that year. Now, the only thing that's not mentioned in here is the PC game. I believe it was 97. No, not 97. Was it? I think it was 2005. Nightfire for the PC. I believe that was a... let me actually look it up here. I believe that was Pierce Brosnan involved with that as far as the voiceover and likeness. Because I remember playing that on the PC, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a great story that they did. James Bond 007 Nightfire's first-person shooter video game featuring the character of the British secret agent James Bond, sequel to Agent Under Fire, published by Electronic Arts in 2002. The game was developed by Economa. Let me see here. Yes, it is. Yeah, it's essentially almost it looks like a sequel to, at least by the cover here, the game cover. It looks like a sequel, not really a sequel, but looks like a follow-up to The World Is Not Enough, because it's got Christmas Jones in it on the cover. But I loved playing that game. Have you played any of the Bond games?
Obviously GoldenEye, like we mentioned. I played.
Right.
What else was there? I played a little bit of From Russia with Love, and I think the one I also played was The World Is Not Enough for the N64. I didn't own a PlayStation 1, so I didn't play any of those games. But those I did play some of the EA stuff. Probably, I think the best one. Maybe not the best one, but the thing probably the most iconic is GoldenEye. But I even enjoyed The World Is Not Enough. It wasn't as good as GoldenEye, but I kind of just enjoyed going through that story. But I do wish I got a chance to play Everything or Nothing, because that does sound like an interesting concept, kind of like making a new Bond film just in video game form.
And the funny thing was, with Everything or Nothing, 2003, yeah, it was right after Die Another Day. And at first, when I first heard about it in 2003, I was like, wait, Everything or Nothing? Is that is that going to be the next Bond film? I didn't realize it was a damn video game at the time. I was like, wait, what? It's a video game? And I so wanted to play it, but I never got a chance to. I never did. But, James Bond, the first-person shooter stuff with GoldenEye, with Nightfire, with the other games. For me, it's probably the only way to play a James Bond game is have it a first-person shooter instead of, a third-person, walkthrough game. There's no way that I could envision a James Bond Grand Theft Auto mashup kind of, you know what I mean, that open world kind of game. I just don't think that would work for the Bond franchise, because the whole point of the video games is they want you to envision yourself as Bond as you play.
I mean, they did try the third person, but it was not nearly as successful. And they do have that newer game coming up. I don't know if it's out yet, but it's like James Bond Legends or something like that I will try. I will check out. But I'm hearing that it's not the greatest game in the world, so I might hold off. But that's coming out this year as well to kind of go along with all the crazy Bondness that's going on this year.
Yeah, I mean, and this, we'll talk about this here in a bit, but we got to talk about. We got to talk about his guns and his weapons, because what is James Bond without a pistol, right? For the first 5 novels, Fleming armed Bond with a Beretta 418, until he received a letter from a 31-year-old Bond enthusiast, a gun expert, Geoffrey Boothroyd, criticizing Fleming's choice of a firearm for Bond, calling it a lady's gun, and not a very nice lady at that. Boothroyd suggested that Bond should swap his Beretta for a Walther PPK 7.65mm, and this exchange of arms made it to the film Dr. No. In thanks, Fleming gave the MI6 armorer in his novels the name Major Boothroyd, I think, and in Dr. No, M introduces him to Bond as the greatest small arms expert in the world. Since Tomorrow Never Dies, Bond's main weapon has been the Walther P99 semi-automatic pistol. Doesn't matter. At least in films, for me, it doesn't matter what he's carrying as a gun, as far, besides the classic guns. Like, when Pierce is, using the machine gun and sliding down the conveyor belt in GoldenEye, that's just an awesome action scene, Mm-hmm. As far as Bond's classic gun, I don't think a Beretta would have worked in film.
Yeah, and the Beretta's not the most reliable or powerful gun, and I think the reason why he said he should go to the Walther PPK is because it was actually what the CIA was using at the time, so it made sense that a secret agent would be using that type of weapon. And from then on, it's always like when people talk about the Walther PPK, it's always referred to as James Bond's gun, and kind of like how the Dirty Harry and his Magnum is that. Those are kind of iconic. When put together, it's the same thing with Bond and his Walther PPK.
Yeah, simply amazing. As far as vehicles, in the early Bond stories, Fleming gave Bond a battleship gray Bentley 4.5 liter. After Bond's car was written off by Hugo Drake's in Moonraker, Fleming gave Bond a Mark II Continental Bentley, which he used in the remaining books of the series. Bond was issued with an Aston Martin DB Mark III with homing device, which he used to track Goldfinger across France. Bond returned to his Bentley for the subsequent novels. The Bond of the films has driven a number of cars, including the Aston Martin V8 Vantage during the 1980s, the V12 Vanquish, and the DB5 during the 2000s, as well as the Lotus Spirit and the BMW Z3, BMW 750iL, and the BMW Z8. He has, however, also needed to drive a number of other vehicles, ranging from, I don't know what that is.
Basically, he's been using a hovercraft to a bus to, actually moon,
amongst others,
actually moon vehicles and Diamonds Are Forever. So yeah, he's pretty much, if it has wheels, he's probably driven it in some way.
And I think just like a lot of people love Batman in Frank Miller's Dark Knight, in that is it Dark Knight Returns? No, I don't remember. It's the God damn it! Hold on.
Dark.
So just like just like Batman in the Dark Knight Returns, having a Batmobile as a tank. In GoldenEye, you have Bond driving a fucking tank. That's simply amazing.
Yeah, that was a pretty fun action sequence. It's kind of hard to maneuver a tank, but he finds a way.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Bond car?
Not necessarily. I kind of appreciate it when he kind of gets in kind of the more odd vehicles, like in Live or Let Die, when he's in like the double-decker bus, or when he's using. I do like the Aston Martin. I think that's probably the Bond car that's probably the most memorable. But I appreciate it more when he gets in kind of the more wacky cars that really don't make any sense, or sometimes they can get too wacky. But I think it's kind of fun when you see him try to drive an 18-wheeler on only on half its wheels, down at bad guys. I think those are more impressive stunts than kind of when you're taking a car that's designed to be fast to go really fast. But yeah, those are probably my favorite Bond vehicles.
Yeah, for me, mine would probably be. It honestly depends on what the car does.
Yeah.
Honestly, it depends on the action of the film. And for me, again, I know I'm a whore for this era, but in Brosnan era, in Tomorrow Never Dies, it was absolutely hilarious that he auto-drived the damn car.
Yeah, that's...
in the parking garage scene, you know what I mean? In Die Another Day, I liked the Aston Martin Vanquish because of the abilities it had with the, the cloaking and the camouflage and all that stuff. That was pretty cool.
Also, I should probably mention in The Spy Who Loved Me, the submarine car that can also go underwater. And that's, that's a pretty cool feature to have for your car, so...
Yes, it is. It very much is. All right, so let's talk about some Bond gadgets here. Fleming's novels and early screen adaptations present minimal equipment, such as the booby-trapped attaché case in From Russia with Love. Though that changed in the novels due to the success of the films, The Man with the Golden Guns novel increased the number of gadgets. For the film adaptations of Bond, the pre-mission briefing by Q Branch became one of the motifs that ran through the series. The first ever on-screen spy gadget was the attaché case shown in From Russia with Love, which had described as a classic 007 product. The gadgets assumed a higher profile 1964 film Goldfinger. The film's success encouraged further espionage equipment from Q Branch to be supplied to Bond. Through the increased use of technology, led to accusation that Bond was over-reliant on equipment, particularly in the later films. I don't agree with that, because the equipment fits the mission to me, depending on what he has to do. I don't know. That's
yeah, I agree, and I think some of the equipment's better than others, but I think the best Bond films are ones who kind of set up a piece of Q equipment, and you think, okay, I know how that's going to be used, but then it gets used in a completely unexpected manner. And you're like, oh, because it shows, yes, he does have the equipment, but he also knows how to use it, and I think that's also part of what makes him great. So,
yeah, the gadgets, the whole Q Branch thing, it was just amazing, and it's just amazing what they can come up with. And I think one of the most amazing ones was, and again, it goes to the humor, it goes to the way that the Silver Age of Bond was with Brosnan, and just the humor. He's like, X-ray document scanner 007, and he's picking up the sandwich, and he's like, what's this? That's my lunch. In the exploding pen, he's like, the writing's on the wall along with the rest of it.
Yeah. I mean, Q. I mean, like his relationship with Q has always been great. You know, the bickering and everything has always been kind of one of the best parts of the Bond franchise.
I really missed Desmond Llewellyn. I liked when they transferred to John Cleese. I thought it was okay, and it wasn't one of those soap opera moments where in Tomorrow Never Dies it was Q, and then in World Is Not Enough they didn't just be like, a voice didn't just come on the screen and say Q is now being played by insert actor name here. They had Desmond there because sadly The World Is Not Enough was his final film. But they had him there with his protege, R. I'm so glad R did not stick.
Yeah.
I'm very happy with that because that was a little weird.
Yeah, a little too on the nose. But
yeah. But I think Cleese could have been an amazing Q if they had given him a chance without the reboot of, without the new age of Craig.
Yeah, if they continue the Bronson type of films, I think he definitely could have worked, and I loved how Q went out. I think it's a very simple moment, but I think it's very moving. Kind of just how it's
very emotional.
Yeah, they don't overplay it. It's really it kind of just happens, and it's easily you can easily miss it. But for those I think that are a fan of the franchise, kind of appreciate how he went out, and I think it's probably one of the better things they handled.
So. Yeah, it is just yeah. So yeah, we've got all that stuff out of the way. Let's you want to talk about some of the cultural impacts?
Sure. Well, obviously since it first came out, it's been a huge success. So it's impacted a lot of different. It's impacted film, TV, comic books, like we've mentioned. What's kind of crazy, actually, if you go back to 1966, there were 22 secret agent films. This is just 1966 alone that were kind of meant to capitalize on the popularity of Bond's success. So you can see, like, Bond is a movie that completely changed film, and it did it immediately. The film has been parodied millions of times. The first one was done in 1964. It was called Carry On Spying. And the villain was called Dr. Crow, and the Bond woman was actually called, or Bond girl, I should say, or I guess it wasn't Bond girl because the character's name was James Bind, but the woman in the film was Daphne Honeybutt, which obviously playing on the different type of things like Octopussy and stuff like that. And more recently, we have things like Austin Powers, of course, Johnny English, which is not as been as successful, but you can see, how that's portraying Bond. Recently, the famous quote, "Bond, James Bond," is one of the most notable quotes in movie history. In 2001, it was voted best loved one-liner in cinema by British cinema goers. It was honored as the 22nd greatest quotation in cinema history by the American Film Institute in the 100-year series. Also in the 100-year series, James Bond was noted as the third greatest film hero. He was just behind Indiana Jones at number 2 and Thaddeus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird at number 1. And it's estimated since Dr. No that a quarter of the world's population has seen a Bond film since the release of Dr. No. So 1/4 of the world has probably seen at least one James Bond film, which is kind of crazy. I don't think there's another franchise that can claim that statement. And then recently in 2012, of course, in the opening ceremony, because of how big and important James Bond is, he was featured in the Olympic ceremony this past summer with the Queen. So his cultural impact has been seen all over, from the Olympics to movies to television. I mean, to everyday life. I think how many people have recited that quote. He's definitely, James Bond is more than a movie. He's more than a book. He's a Bond movie, like he's an event. Like it's almost like a pseudo religion in a way, because there's so much to it. There's so many different elements. But there's so many different things to like, and there's so many different things to pick apart and dislike as well. I mean, there just are. But it's just amazing. So I think we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we're going to come back to kind of give final thoughts and to kind of tease you guys on what the M-Wire Shaken Not Stirred spotlight will be. And we'll be back after this.
You can now hear the GeekCast Radio Network while on the go with Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher is a free-use and talk mobile app available for your smartphone. And when you download Stitcher to hear GeekCast Radio, you'll have a chance to win money. Downloading is quick and easy. Just find Stitcher in the App Store. During registration, hit the promo code box and enter GeekCast Radio, all one word, to get automatically entered to win $100. The latest episodes of the shows will be waiting for you in your favorites. You'll get access to lots of other amazing shows too. Always available to you on demand, no syncing. It's Stitcher Smart Radio. Don't forget to enter promo code GeekCast Radio when you register.
To enter his web of sin, but don't go in. Golden words he will pour in your ear, but his lies can't disguise what you feel. For a golden girl knows when he's kissed her, it's the kiss of death from Mr. Goldfinger.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download at www.audibletrial.com/GeekCast Radio. Over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Charming, sophisticated secret agent. Shaken but not disturbed.
So we are back, and I can't believe it's been 50 years of Bond being 007. I mean, it's just amazing. As you said earlier, this is probably one of the, if not the the longest running film franchise with one character, at one main character at the head of it, and all the adventures that James Bond has had over the years, whether it be in video games, television, film, radio, comic strips, books, whatever. It's just something about James Bond and something about his universe. Any part of it will appeal to anyone in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, definitely. I think if whatever your film tastes are, there's probably a Bond film that fits those tastes. I mean, there's more romantic films, there's more action-oriented, there's more comedic-oriented. I mean, it's a franchise really that I think anyone can kind of find something in there that they would like. And I think that's why it's lasted so long. I mean, you think about it, teenagers today are going to see a movie that their grandparents went to go see when they were teenagers. That's kind of crazy to think about. That's lasted that long, generations over generations, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon. I think it's probably going to continue, and if the popularity just seems growing, it seems it's still high, and people are still super excited for James Bond, and there's millions of reasons why, and I think we touched on most of the most important ones.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing we didn't really touch on at this point, while the sirens go off in the background, the only thing we didn't really touch on was the whole sexuality of the film franchise and the fact that Bond girl is a term in pop culture now.
Yes.
And every female actress wants to be a Bond girl at one point in her life.
Yeah, and I mean, it's had some of the biggest names during the time. I mean, people recently like Halle Berry, Denise Richards. Maybe Denise Richards isn't the biggest name anymore, but yeah, Bond. Correct. And it's funny when you look at the '60s films compared to the films now and how sexuality has changed. It was a lot more open in the '60s, obviously, because of things like there weren't as sex wasn't. Was a lot more open, obviously. It was, free love and sex all over the place. And it's kind of the Bond girls in today's films, I think, a lot more dialed down, and it's crazy that you would think it would be more censored in today's world compared to the 1960s that would continually to push buttons, and I think it really it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way during the time, but I think now people kind of are more accepting of it, and I think it, in a lot of ways, is a big reason why, I think, a big reason.
Yeah, I think a lot of the openness of the older films is going to shock me when I watch them for our Shaken Not Stirred series, because, as I said earlier, I did go back and just for fun I watched Man with the Golden Gun, and I cannot believe he smacked her around. Yeah. James Bond hit a woman. I was like, what?
Yeah, and he does worse than that. I mean, he does not. I mean, his character, I mean, it's the 60s, so obviously women's rights aren't completely where they are now, but he was not afraid to hit women. I mean, I couldn't imagine that happening today and people not being upset about it, but it's kind of crazy what they got away with during the time. And I don't know if you remember this, but there was actually a pretty funny skit on SNL way back when Pierce Brosnan was still the character, and it basically was him getting a call from his doctor, and they were going over all the STDs he's gotten over the years for having so much sex with people, and it was just kind of funny because you're like, well, what do you expect when you're sleeping around so much? What do you think what's going to happen? But it was just, I know, it's one of those things that's always stuck with me. Yeah.
And I don't think, and I could be wrong here, but every Bond film that has a sex scene in it essentially is a softcore porno, because and it's so against sexual education because they never show Or they never even hint at the fact that he's going to use a condom.
No. Yeah, Bond never practiced safe sex. I think he was, or at least say they make it very blatant. He's very open.
No, not at all. So yeah, this month, November through December, Dan and I are going to take a journey. Dan's going to do several different blogs. What blogs are you doing for Bond month?
I'm going to do a few. I'm going to kind of cover why Bond has been so iconic. Like, what are the reasons why he's lasted over the years and compared to other franchises. Looking at, who the best villains are, the best Bond girls. And I'm actually going to rank the Bond films in order from, the best to the worst. And obviously, I could see that causing some controversy. I think my picks may not be the same as everyone's, but I tried to be fair and kind of leave my own personal bias out of it. But yeah, and hopefully maybe a couple more different Bond articles. I'll try to definitely highlight films that we aren't going over in M-Wire, so we kind of touch on all the different aspects of Bond.
If you want to do written reviews of the ones we're not reviewing in the Shaken Not Stirred series and M-Wire, go right ahead.
Yeah. I may try to do that as well. I will definitely be doing a written review of Skyfall as well once.
Right. Yes. We will both be going to see Skyfall individually, and we will be reviewing Skyfall for our series as well. And I think over the years, as I've said before, there's just something to offer to everyone with this franchise, and going forward, you never know what's going to happen next.
No. Yeah.
I'll just have to wait and see till after the sky falls. We hope you enjoyed this episode of GeekCast Radio. Wish you will join us next time when we will be doing our 2012 Year in Review. That will be coming up in December. Year in Review for 2012 will be aired New Year's Eve, so we will see you then.
I've always tried to teach you two things. First, never let them see you bleed.
And the second?
Always have an escape plan.
Country.
England.
Gun.
Shot.
Agent.
Provocateur.
Murder.
Employment.
Skyfall. Skyfall.
Done. Some men are coming to kill us. We're gonna kill them first.
Hear my heart burst again, for this is the end. I've drowned and dreamt this moment, so overdue I owe them. Swept away, I'm stolen. Let the sky fall and it crumbles. We will stand tall, I'll face it all together. Let the sky fall.
You've just listened to GeekCast Radio on the GeekCast Radio Network. There are several ways to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show. First, visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on all of our different podcasts. Second, you can rate our show and leave us feedback in iTunes. Third, follow us on Twitter at GeekCast Radio. Fourth, become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/GeekCast Radio. Call the voicemail line 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you are leaving the message for and your name. So until next time, Unleash the geek in you.